Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's weather briefing. Today is February 15th, 2021. I'm pleased to welcome AccuWeather Senior Meteorologist Tyler Royce to give this week's weather presentation. And without further ado, Tyler, I'll let you take it away.
All right, thank you guys. Hope everyone can hear me well. I'm in the office today, and so following protocols with wearing the mask. Um, I feel like every time I do this now, I feel like I have lots and lots of weather to discuss. And we're going to kind of do a holistic or big overview across US and the pond, then we go over to the pond, and then we're going to zoom in to what we're going to be focusing on with the weather this upcoming week, which hopefully there's some light at the end of the tunnel. I wanted to start off with kind of going over the last 5 days, because the active weather just really hasn't been here in the United States, but has been really also over in Europe. And what I wanted to show with this is here is you currently have sorry, let me get the correct color up there first. Um, so it's seen. What you have is your trough, the big massive trough that's now in the center of the United States, starting to ease itself in. But as you continue, as you move eastward, you have your ridge in the Atlantic, you have your Greenland blocking, and then you have massive trough that's essentially across much of northern Europe. What that has led to is some wild weather last week across Europe, leading to a historic, I say historic, it hasn't been seen for at least in a decade, several inches accumulating in Amsterdam, a blizzard in northern Germany that rivals the blizzards that happened in the late 70s, specifically the winter of 78, 79, where they saw two of them. And then you had another winter storm right after that come up and impact Poland, Ukraine, and Belarus a second time. So while the cold and the snow is happening in the Pacific Northwest and that moved into the Rockies and into the plains, Europe was dealing with their own historic snowfall. And it's already been a historic winter so far, because this isn't the first time cities that haven't seen snow in several years, at least a decade, are seeing snow. For those who might have seen, it was back in early, about mid-January, that Spain saw historic snowfall for the first time. Many places saw by several, I mean like up to 2 feet of snow accumulating in um, parts of places like Madrid that they haven't seen since the early 70s um, in regards to that. So this winter overall is quite wintry in Europe. Now, that's a contrast to last year, which it wasn't. And the big reason towards that is I want to show you what the NAO values are over the last, what they were last year and what they are now. From December through March, the NAO values were highly positive, like record breaking. It consistently stayed positive. During the same time, well, relatively, you go December and into January, we're on the flip side, we're negative NAO, which is a total flip from what they have been able to deal with and what in terms has been the more recent trend over the last several years of seeing several months during the winter time of being negative NAO. There is, and I'm going to do a plug here for the Royal Meteorological Society here. They did a masterclass series this fall, and they're going to do several ones later. And what they did was the first one was they looked at the winter of 1920, so last winter, and explained it through teleconnections. And then they did different masterclass series on synoptic storms in the North Atlantic, climate change, and then subseasonal predictions. Now it's geared towards Europe mainly, but what we saw in this exceptional winter one was the reasons why the NAO was so positive last winter. And that goes to it was linked towards the so record-breaking positive IOD, which is the Indian Ocean Dipole, which deals with which side of the Indian Ocean has the warm waters and which has the cool waters. That was so positive that it broke records, that it transpired down the line that the NAO for several months stayed positive. This wasn't the case this winter. So they have terrific series. I suggest you go watch. And I am going to link towards some of that research into some of what has transpired in terms with the teleconnections and the long-term forecasting side of things as we progress through. One of the reasons why NAO is negative this winter also transpires to that we're in La Nina. And from La Nina, there's been research that couples when you couple La Nina with the MJO, you're more likely to get negative NAO patterns. And that comes through more of the stratospheric teleconnections or workings with the stratosphere. A lot of that work has been done through, go back to the Royal Met, through Robert Lee, over a research scientist over at the University of Reading in the UK. He has one of his talks is also through the Royal Met Society. So again, that research is kind of more on the newer side, and that kind of goes into splitting up and figuring out weather patterns from the North Atlantic into Europe. But how I look at it is well, that also has a backside, and that backside is the East Coast of the United States. So with that in mind, generally we have seen that play out. Now the MGO, if we were to pull up the MGO forecast here, take a look at it. Go back one. Yes, I want. Take a look at it. If you were to take a look at it more throughout relatively much of January and December, it has largely been on the neutral side of things. It being largely in the center circle for what some call phase 0 here. More recently has come out and is in phases 7 and 6, were in phases 2, 3, and 4. All that plays a role with what kind of patterns you're going to get when you throw La Nina. So the flip side is if you have El Nino and MJO, you're going to get certain patterns in the atmosphere. So that kind of goes into the active pattern of why we've seen, probably at least specifically here in State College, probably one of the more winter winters in recent memory here. But now we're going to shift gears and we're going to take a look at what is going to go on with relatively the week. And I just realized one of my loops did not load for the 500 correctly, so I'm going to fix that. That's the one I wanted. Let that happen. So on the top two is the GFS, and on the bottom two are the Europeans, and the ensembles are going to be on your right-hand side, your deterministic on the left-hand side here. So we're going to start with relatively now, and we have a winter storm that kind of goes from Texas up into the Ohio Valley right now. It's on the it's coming out of the trough and heading up the trough, up towards us. And then as we go through, what we're going to watch, that warp max, it's going to kind of lead towards the trough becoming somewhat negative as it goes through. But the overall mean trough as you go through the week continues to be centered over the plains. And so as the trough we have over Texas now moves out and the warp max moves out, you have one coming right in from the West Pacific Northwest into by Wednesday. And then as we move towards Thursday and Friday, that starts to move eastward as well. And my running theory is right now, and I've seen this a lot of times, is the weather in Europe is finally quieting down. The weather, it's kind of a 7-day lag time, but then that leads to a lag time here in the US of 7 days later, weather quieting down here in the United States. And I've seen the flip side. I've seen a major storm in Europe, and then 7 days later, there's a major storm in the US. That's just more kind of no hardcore observation, but data-wise, but more of an observation. But if you notice, as we head into this towards this weekend, we have a ridge starting to build into the plain, so bringing an end towards a very active 2-3 week period here in the States. And I know for all of us, we'd be like that quiet period. But relatively, if we go from Wednesday into Thursday, this trough really comes and starts. And the question is going to become, does it try to go negative, or does it really relatively stay neutral as it swings eastward into the Atlantic Ocean? So that's relatively what's happening at the 500 level here. What I want to now show you is the let's go up to 850s, your 850 temperatures, because this is the wild stuff. We're not just talking about snow versus rain. Some stats I just wanted to throw out there from earlier this morning is in terms of ice amounts. You're talking about Weslaco. So Weslaco is largely on the, make sure I get this right here, is right on the Mexico border. They reported this morning 1/100th of an inch of ice at Weslaco, Texas. So you're talking ice accumulation all the way along the Mexico border. That should be kind of blowing your mind that we've been able to see that. But that's what we've been able to have here. So with that, we're going to, you see that, and you see that Tyler, Texas are up to 1/10 of an inch of ice. You've seen up to, so far in Jackson, Mississippi, up to 1/100th of an inch of ice. This is going to continue downstream, at least with the current storm here, and that's largely because you have warmer upper level air over the cold air that's down at the surface for much of parts of southern, eastern Texas up through the Tennessee Valley, going to be up and across the parts of the Northeast that way. So as we continue to watch our storm, that's relatively going to be today into tonight and into tomorrow, notice that the 850 line is going to be largely around us. The running rule, I think if there's any professors here listening, is that we have here at AccuWeather is, it doesn't matter what model. If one model shows a warm layer, warm nose over State College, we're going to have sleet, and we're going at least sleet. And then in our case, we probably will also have freezing rain as well. The question is going to become, when I go to the surface levels, our first piece, is it snow, and how much could we get out of that? So the warm layer is going to reach all the way up into northern New England, potentially trying to get into the St. Lawrence River Valley up in Quebec province. And you could tell the GFS is way more bullish on that than the European. Even the European ensembles are not as far north with that as well. And then right behind this storm right now, the upper levels cool off at least in the 850s, and then we wait for the next storm to come. And this is where the interesting part happens, and this is what we were discussing over this weekend, is the storm track, the second storm track, the late week storm track. As the trough moves eastward, where's that low? Where's that storm track going to be for the late week storm? And as a coworker pointed out, it's very rarely when you have a second storm, one that's right after the initial one, does it take a similar track in terms of going over the same area. More likely it's going to end up farther east, not at points westward. That's something that we have to watch, and we're going to see in the models, and why there's I won't say distrust, but looking for the word here, um, lean towards, probably is probably a better way of saying it, towards a certain model over another's based on their storm track in terms of what makes actually sense here. So we go back to the 850s, and notice as we go into Thursday, 850s for us are still below zero. As you go through the nighttime, notice that the GFS blasts and even the GEFS blasts the zero line well above us towards Syracuse and Binghamton, while the European remains to our east and south as we go into Friday and into Friday. Again, we go into that rule I said that we have here at work, and others that professors have at campus, is that you have a warm layer. Anyone shows the warm layer, you're going to throw. That's likely to happen here. Yeah, at least my time here, I have yet to see a forecasted warm layer not pan out here in regards to that. We take a look at the 925 temperatures here, and largely your purple line is the zero line here. As you go forward, that later tonight, that zero line goes above us. So sometime I would suspect during the evening, late evening hours, I would suspect that's when the transition, quote unquote, occurs, in the lull between the first wave and the second wave of today's storm. That's when allows the second wave to be more of a sleet and freezing rain type storm for us. As you go through then into Tuesday, that moves eastward. You're bringing that threat for freezing rain and sleet all the way up into central and parts of northern New England. And you can see rain for parts of like New York City, Providence, New Haven, Connecticut, the Cape. Then we have the lull Wednesday, and then as we go Thursday, we have that storm ramping up. And again, notice on the GFS, that zero line of 925 goes all the way up towards Buffalo, towards Syracuse, while the Europeans keeps it farther south of us. It's going to be interesting because that's going to be relatively determining who sees that mix and who doesn't. With that, I did see the question and comment. I will address it in a second. Because that's going to going back with wherever that the warm layer ends up is going to determine where that freezing or where that mix is going to be across southern and central New England, and even back to here later in the week. That's a very good question, Rich. It's a very good question. The question is will we get above freezing at the surface before the precipitation ends and get some rain Tuesday morning before the flash freeze occurs? It's a very good question. Could there be rain? And I honestly, could it happen? Possibly. I think that's probably a low probability, at least in my opinion. And if we go towards take a look at what we can see with the surface. Tuesday morning, at least in the Tuesday morning aspect, we just start to dry out. So you really, if you're going to see any rain, really, it's going to happen Monday after midnight, in that time period, as the storm really starts to pull away and we start to dry out. Probably what will happen is, as the best chance for us to see rain is when we're drying out. So it probably could be some drizzle. Um, Otherwise, I think much of our precipitation for the storm is going to be snow. Then we'll see snow this afternoon with the first part. Then we go over to sleet and freezing rain for the overnight, and then we end very quickly, and we probably see some drizzle if not with that. Then we start to see our second winter storm start to really fire up Wednesday down again in the deep south, not deep south, but the southern plains. Um, and then it's going to take, as I said, a similar track. Notice on the GFS, the surface track, it wants to go, the primary low that develops over the southern plains wants to go west of the Appalachians and then redevelop off the mid-Atlantic coast, while the European is more towards the primary low is more towards the Atlantic coast, with some kind of secondary trying to European wants to try to do both at the same time, but the primary low is going to kind of pull it towards the coast. And what I wanted to show here is here's the kind of the mean of where the low pressures are. And this is Tuesday, so we're talking about our storm leaving. And then finally we start to see the storm develop Wednesday. And then by Thursday, notice the cluster. It's very unique that we have some kind of cluster of some trying to pull up west of the Appalachians and then redevelop by Thursday across the Mid-Atlantic. And if that low center gets really close towards New York City, towards Long Island, you're going to be seeing that mix really get into central New England and even back into here, because what you're going to do with that transfer is you're going to have that warm layer over us. So as what the GFS was trending, this could be some of my bias, could be some of influence of what others have said, is that it's very rare that you have storms take back-to-back tracks in terms of following the same track, given how close that they are, and that second one, it tends to be farther to the east. There is some thinking by other co-workers of mine and myself, is that the European, and I would even agree, the European ensemble mean is more likely to be farther east along the east coast and up along, instead of being up west of the Appalachians and redeveloping off of the mid-Atlantic later this week. So lastly, I really want to end with is we're taking a look at 3 different probability maps for 24 hours. It's snowfall greater than an inch, snowfall greater than 6 inches, and then snowfall greater than 12 inches, and the probabilities of them based on the European ensembles. And then I'll go over kind of largely the thinking of AccuWeather and with what I agree with as well with that. So later today, you see much of you talking the European ensembles highly showing 6+ inches potentially from northwest Louisiana all the way up through much of Ohio and getting into Buffalo. We're probably on that 1-inch line, 1 to 2 inches, and then it's going to go to sleet and freezing rain, which, as another coworker was pointing out, is something we probably need, because if it was just sleet and freezing rain from the get-go, it's going to be much harder to take care of the sidewalks, the roads, the cars, versus if we had an inch of snow and then you had the sleet and the freezing rain, because then it's easier to clean. What he actually said, and he said it sounds silly, but if you threw some of your snow onto your sidewalk, onto your driveway, to give it that that snow layer to make it easier to clean off later. And it actually makes sense, something you necessarily wouldn't think of. Um, so that's something he's actually going to do with his, but that is given the ice situation here, and we're looking at 1/10 of an inch of ice in that regard. Again, I'm not perfect forecast when it comes to ice. Uh, so we could see probably up to 1/4 inch in regards to that as well. But I would say probably 1/10 of an inch is probably a good starting point. As you go then through, you see the chances for over 12 inches are really on the smaller side on the EPS. And as we were discussing at work here, the, the reason that is because you're basing it off of a 10-to-1 ratio, which for parts of the St. Lawrence River Valley into northern New England, that's not the case. Um, you're not going to see a 10-to-1 ratio. You're going to see higher ratios. And so with that, you're going to see probably a bigger expansive probability of 12 plus for parts of like Quebec City. Montreal might be probably on the line, but you're talking northern Vermont, northern New Hampshire, northern Maine in that regard. So then we go into what we want to know later in the week, what the potential is. And with this storm, I do think there's going to be much of the snow is going to be a front end thump, especially for, I'm going to say, places south and east of us and into southern New England. That's where a lot of the snow is going to be. It's going to be a front end thump. This is a typical front end thump snow where the models say, oh, 6 inches of snow or 4 inches of snow, and they happen to get double that because this is the opportune time where they're going to get the crazy 2-3 inch snow hour inch an hour snow bands as the warm front marches north. Then they switch over to sleet and freezing rain for New York City, southern New England. Nevertheless, you see the 1 inch again, very much Ohio Valley, and then it really starts Oklahoma, northern Texas, and I would actually, it would be interesting to know seeing the probability of 6 inches of snow for parts of southeast or southwest Arkansas being around 50 to 60%. How many times they've actually seen that happen, see 6 inches of snow or more in one, when you go back, parts of that are going to see it. The chance of that actually happening in a season or how many times if it ever has going forward. So that'd be something interesting to find out. But as you go through Thursday night into Friday, that 6 inches EPS is around showing about 50% of we can see 6 inches more. In the office right now, we kind of like that. And then as the farther north you go, where you won't have any really mixing thread. You're talking again St. Lawrence River Valley, looking at the potential to seeing at least 6 inches of snow, possibly even up to 12 inches of snow in regards to that. And so I will end with currently what we've already seen. So this goes from this previous Saturday, the whole comprehensions of the snow of the first system, seeing what's already happened and what's going to happen, and then what we kind of expect for at least here for us. We're on the 1 to 3. The gradient's going to be very small between us and, let's say, Phillipsburg. You go up to Bradford. The gradient's going to be very tight in this regard. And then finally, take a look at what we expect Tuesday into Thursday for down in the south. Dallas 3 to 6. Again, southwest Arkansas, northwest Louisiana. I would love to know how many times they've actually seen 6 inches of snow more than once in a season. That's very fun. That would be a fun fact to know. And then finally, what we kind of can expect for us later in the week. And I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much, Tyler. As he alluded to, feel free to ask any questions or make any comments. The chat and Q&A are both open, and we are both keeping an eye on those. Tyler, it does look like there are a couple of comments from Paul in the chat. If you can
Yeah,
pull
I
them.
did see that. So thank you, Paul, on that. And he says, I'll just read that. He says the difference between the two storms again is also going to be the surface high. You have the one that's going to be over the Great Lakes, and then you have one leading later, and I can go to this one as well. The storm right now, you have a high that's going to be somewhere over the eastern Great Lakes, north of the Great Lakes, and then for us, we have the high over New England into St. Lawrence River Valley again, River Valley there as well. So that also, again, will be playing a role and probably will be, at least in terms of the second storm, keeping the cold air in place longer, making it more stubborn to erode with the later storm than relatively the first storm.
All right. Does anyone else have any comments or queries? Things you'd like Tyler to look at before we part ways here? I'll give just a couple minutes while anybody's typing something up.
I will say that I'm not showing any forecast for Europe because, as I alluded to earlier, the weather is finally quieting down to where I actually I can take a breath of air and say, I can actually look at something and not feel rushed with it, which has been the theme of the last month or so over there.
All right. Well, I am not seeing any. Just as I was.
No, that's just Paul teasing me because he's a coworker of mine.
All right. Well, with that, I believe we will go on and wrap things up here. Tyler, thank you again for joining us.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
This weather briefing and all other weather briefings will be archived on the Campus Weather Service YouTube page at youtube.com/Campus Weather Service. We look forward to joining all of you next week as Dr. John Neese from the Penn State Department of Meteorology and Atmospheric Science will be giving next week's weather briefing. I look forward to seeing all of you, same time, same place, 10:15 a.m. Eastern. We'll see you all next week. Have a great week, everybody.
See you guys.